The book is based on my blog, Planet Grief, which I started after my husband drowned whilst we were on holiday in Barbados in February 2011. And if you think it's going to be just another misery memoir, a miserable misery memoir.
She was last seen walking into her home, but months later, her body was discovered hidden beneath it. Detectives lifted a heavy lid in the garage. Cold air rushed up from the darkness. A torchlight flickered across the water. At first, they saw a flash of fur. Then, the outline of a body. It was Helen Bailey, a beloved author, a woman who once wrote stories to bring comfort to children. And now, her final chapter was buried in a hidden cesspit, just feet from the rooms she thought were safe. The man who claimed to love her, the man she trusted with her future, was the same man living above her secret grave. This is not just a story of a disappearance. It is a story of betrayal, a story of a double life, and a tragedy that would shock an entire community. Before we dive deeper into this chilling case, I'd love to hear from you. Go down to the comments and tell me two things: where in the world you're watching from, and what time it is right now as you're listening. It's always incredible to see how true crime connects people across every corner of the globe at every hour of the day. I'll be reading through them, so don't be shy. And while you're here, if you enjoy deep dives into cases like this, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. It's a simple click, but it helps more than you know, and it means you'll never miss the next story we uncover together. Helen Bailey was more than a name on the cover of a book. She was a voice that echoed through childhood bedrooms, carried in the pages of stories that children read under the covers late at night. Her books weren't just words on paper. They were invitations into a world that felt both familiar and comforting. Her Electra Brown series, written for teenagers, stood out because it was funny, awkward, and heartbreakingly honest about growing up. Fans adored her for capturing the chaos of adolescence with empathy. She didn't talk down to her readers. She spoke with them. And in doing so, she became part of their lives. But Helen's writing reached beyond children. She was a woman who had lived through grief herself. In 2011, while on holiday, her husband of more than 20 years, John Sinfield, suddenly collapsed and died. For Helen, the world she knew crumbled in an instant. She later described it as living in a fog, an emptiness that didn't seem to lift. She poured that grief into words. Out of her heartbreak came When Bad Things Happen in Good Bikinis, a deeply personal memoir about loss. It wasn't a book written to impress, it was written to survive. Helen used her pen as a way of navigating the unbearable, but she also gave comfort to thousands of others who found her story echoed their own. Friends and colleagues spoke of her kindness. She had a warm laugh, a sharp wit, and a quiet strength that inspired those around her. To the public eye, she became an image of resilience, a woman who had been broken by tragedy, but who found a way to stand again. By the time she met Ian Stewart in 2011, she was ready to embrace life again. He, too, was a widow, and their shared experience of loss became the foundation of their relationship. To her friends, it looked like the perfect match. A story of two people who had walked through grief, finding light in one another. In interviews and public appearances, Helen radiated joy once more. She spoke about her new home in Royston, about her love of dogs, and about moving forward with Ian by her side. On social media, she posted images of domestic happiness, their dogs, their holidays, their seemingly ordinary but content life together. From the outside looking in, it seemed like Helen had finally found the peace she deserved. To her loyal readers, it was heartwarming. To her friends, it was a relief. But behind the closed doors of that quiet Hertfordshire house, something darker was growing. Helen believed she had found love again. A partner who understood loss. A man who promised stability. But she didn't know the truth. She didn't know that love, her second chance at happiness, was about to become the very weapon used to end her life. After the heartbreak of losing her first husband, Helen Bailey was hesitant to open her life to love again. Yet when she met Ian Stewart, something about his quiet composure drew her in. He was a widower, a father of 2 children, someone who had endured loss and come through it, or so it seemed. Their connection was immediate, a bond forged in shared grief. To Helen, it felt like a lifeline, a chance to find companionship and stability once more. Ian was attentive. He listened to her fears. He encouraged her creativity. He was, at first glance, exactly what she needed. Friends and family, relieved to see her smiling again, welcomed him warmly. To them, Ian appeared trustworthy, reliable, and deeply caring. He accompanied Helen to book launches, joined her at local events, and integrated himself into the circles that had once been hers alone. But underneath the surface, subtle shifts began to occur. Ian gradually began steering decisions about the home they shared. Conversations about renovations, property investments, and finances became more frequent, more insistent. It was never aggressive at first. It was polite, reasonable, necessary. Yet, little by little, he inserted himself into every aspect of Helen's world. Bank accounts, investment decisions, legal paperwork. Each small concession made her life easier in the short term, but over time, it built a network of control she didn't realize she was giving away. Neighbors saw nothing unusual. On the surface, the couple seemed perfectly ordinary. Sunday walks, laughter shared over coffee, quiet evenings at home. But inside that house, every step Helen took toward happiness was being monitored, guided, and influenced. Helen was unaware that Ian was meticulously positioning himself at the center of her life. Decisions she believed were mutual were subtly manipulated. Plans that seemed harmless were shaping a future that would later become a trap. Despite this, she allowed herself to hope. Hope that love could rebuild what loss had taken. Hope that the pain of the past could finally be replaced with joy. Hope that the man she trusted would never betray her. It was a new beginning. But in the shadows of that beginning lay a deception so calculated that it would change everything. And it was one Helen could not see coming. The house in Royston, where Helen and Ian lived, was the kind of home that made strangers pause. Quiet streets lined with neat hedges. Windows that gleamed in the morning sun. A facade of calm and order. To the outside world, it was a picture-perfect sanctuary. But Helen had no idea that behind those walls, something sinister was taking root. A concealed hatch, hidden beneath the flooring of the garage, went unnoticed by every visitor. A space that would later become the hiding place of a secret so horrifying, it would shake the village to its core. As the days passed, Helen began to notice subtle changes in herself. She felt constantly fatigued. Simple tasks drained her. Even her beloved writing felt impossible at times. Her friends observed the difference. They remarked on her pallor, the slight trembling in her hands, the moments when her smile faltered as if weighed down by an unseen burden. She confided in them, speaking softly about sleepless nights and strange headaches. They suggested rest, exercise, perhaps a visit to the doctor. Helen smiled through it, insisting it was just stress, a natural consequence of her demanding career and the emotional weight of rebuilding her life. But what she didn't know was that she was being poisoned. Zopiclone, a prescription sleeping pill, had been introduced into her system. Weeks of subtle drugging left her disoriented, drowsy, and vulnerable. Each dose was calculated, barely noticeable, leaving no immediate alarm. It was a quiet assault on her body, hidden beneath the veneer of ordinary life. Helen carried on. She attended meetings, signed books, walked the dogs, laughed with friends. And yet, with every passing day, she grew weaker, unaware that someone she trusted was orchestrating her decline. Ian Stewart, the man she believed was her partner, her safe harbor, was the architect of this hidden danger. The fatigue, the strange illnesses, the exhaustion she attributed to stress, all were part of a careful, calculated plan. Helen thought it was stress. She thought her body was simply telling her to slow down. She had no reason to suspect the very walls around her or the person she loved were concealing a truth that would ultimately lead to her death. Months later, investigators would uncover the evidence that told a story of betrayal, manipulation, and murder. And the concealed hatch, the quiet walls, and the seemingly perfect home would become the stage for one of the most chilling crimes in recent British history. She had no way of knowing that the safety she felt within her own home was an illusion, and that illusion would become the very thing that trapped her life in shadows, hidden from the world. April 2016 began like any other spring morning in Royston. Birds sang. The streets were quiet. Yet inside the Bailey Stewart home, a growing unease was about to surface. Helen Bailey did not appear that morning. She did not answer calls or messages. Friends and colleagues began to worry. She hadn't been known to disappear without notice. And when hours passed, the concern turned into alarm. Ian Stewart contacted the police. Calmly, methodically. According to him, Helen had left a note, folded neatly, carefully written. She needed space, he explained, and had gone to Broadstairs. A trip, a short escape from her usual routine, nothing more. His tone betrayed no panic, no urgency. He described her as rational, thoughtful, and clear-headed when she made this decision. Police arrived at the home. The first thing they noticed was a lack of disturbance. Doors were locked, windows intact, no signs of struggle. Everything appeared normal, almost too normal. Ian presented the note to investigators, a plausible explanation, perfectly staged to reassure anyone who read it. Detectives began questioning neighbors. No one reported seeing Helen leave. No one noticed anything unusual. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. Yet in the minds of the police, something felt wrong. Something about the meticulous calm with which Ian recounted events didn't sit right.
From what I understand, from what we've discussed and what I've been told by the investigation, is that Helen was last seen on Monday, the 11th of April.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Would like you to take me through what happened that day.
This is what I can't remember very well. I'll tell you what I can remember, but some of what I can remember is maybe what I've said since and when I've looked in the diary, things like that.
Okay.
When I got to solicitors, he went through the paperwork I'd taken, and I realised I'd only taken very old paperwork. I'd left half of it here. So I dashed back. I wrote back, wasn't sure what happened. Saw the other paperwork on the side. Shouted for Helen. Helen wasn't there, so I thought at that stage she was just walking the dog or with his neighbours. I went back to solicitors, was only in town. Just dropped the paper, didn't stay, dropped the paperwork and came home. Helen still wasn't here. And then I started to think, well, she has gone.
Over the next hours, officers scoured the house. They looked for fingerprints, footprints, any indication she had left voluntarily or been forced. Nothing. No signs of haste, no signs of a struggle, and no signs of her usual life suddenly paused. Everything was too orderly. Helen's disappearance became a case that would baffle investigators. It wasn't violent. It wasn't messy. It was quiet, subtle, deliberately constructed. And as the search expanded, questions multiplied. Where had she gone? Why did Ian's story seem rehearsed? Why did the house look untouched, as if no one had been gone at all? Every detail that seemed reassuring was now a piece of a puzzle hiding something far darker. Helen Bailey had vanished. And in the silence of her Royston home, a truth waited, carefully concealed, waiting for detectives to uncover it. As the investigation into Helen Bailey's disappearance progressed, doubts began to creep in among even the most experienced detectives. Something about the story didn't add up. The house was intact. No signs of struggle. No footprints or evidence of a sudden departure. And yet, she was gone. The first question investigators asked themselves was simple. Why would Helen leave behind the things that mattered most to her? Her phone, her wallet, her keys, all abandoned. And most tellingly, Boris, her loyal dog, who had been by her side through every hardship. Helen would never leave him behind. Never. Family and friends echoed the same sentiment, their voices tight with worry and disbelief. Helen would never leave Boris, they insisted. That single fact planted seeds of suspicion in the minds of the police. Something about Ian Stewart's explanation, the story that she had taken a spontaneous trip to Broadstairs, no longer seemed plausible. Then the emails appeared. From Helen's account. Carefully worded. Polite. Concise. At first, they seemed to offer hope. proof that Helen was alive and simply choosing to remain away from everyone. Ian presented them openly, emphasizing that these messages confirmed her well-being. But detectives were cautious. Something about the tone, the timing, the phrasing didn't match what they knew of Helen. Experts were called in. Digital forensic analysts examined the emails line by line. What they discovered was chilling. The emails had been fabricated. Not written by Helen. Not sent from her devices. Every word, every detail was carefully constructed to mislead and manipulate those who cared about her. The reality became stark. The disappearance was not a mere flight. It was an orchestrated deception. Every gesture, every message, every calculated detail had been designed to misdirect, to convince the world that Helen had simply chosen to vanish. Investigators began to reconstruct Ian's actions during the critical days before Helen's disappearance. His calm composure, the way he had presented the note, the staged emails, all of it was now viewed under a different light. A pattern emerged, one that suggested planning, manipulation, and a disturbing intent. With each new revelation, the investigators realized the complexity of the plan. Helen's vanishing was not impulsive. It was deliberate. And the deeper they dug, the more they understood that the truth, carefully concealed behind a facade of calm and normalcy, was far darker than anyone could have imagined. The investigation was no longer about finding a missing person. It had transformed into a quest for justice, peeling back the layers of deception one carefully constructed lie at a time. Days turned into weeks, and the search for Helen Bailey pressed on. The village of Royston remained tense, neighbors exchanging worried whispers, posters of Helen plastered in shop windows, and volunteers joining the police in the growing effort to find her. Amid this turmoil, Ian Stewart moved through the investigation with a detachment that was striking. He attended briefings and interviews with the composure of someone observing a story unfold from a distance, rather than a man desperate to find a missing partner. His movements were measured, his words deliberate. Even in the presence of police, friends, and family, he betrayed no hint of panic. No sleepless nights. No tearful desperation. Only a calm, almost clinical, control. On television appeals, Ian's calmness became a focal point. He spoke with clarity, appealing for information, for leads, for anyone who might have seen Helen. He appeared cooperative, supportive, sincere. Yet the very ease with which he handled the public spotlight raised subtle alarms among the investigators. Something about his composure seemed too perfect, too rehearsed, too controlled. Detectives began to watch him more closely. His friends noticed it too, a quiet insistence that everything was fine, that Helen had simply chosen a break, a short trip. But the people who knew her best felt unease. Helen had never acted like this. Never abandoned her routine, and certainly never left her beloved dog, Boris, behind. Every interaction Ian had with investigators, neighbors, and the media was carefully observed. The calm exterior, once reassuring to those around him, was now under scrutiny. Police noted the absence of visible stress, the lack of erratic behavior, the patience with which he repeated his story again and again. Each detail was a clue, not just about Helen's disappearance, but about Ian himself. Slowly, quietly, detectives began to mark him as the prime suspect. Not because they had proof, not yet, but because the inconsistencies, the perfectly maintained calm, and the subtle signs of manipulation pointed to him. Every calculated move, every measured word, was being logged, analyzed, and considered in the growing tapestry of suspicion. And yet, suspicion alone could not bring Helen back. It could not erase the anxiety, the fear, or the absence that hung over the community. It could not undo the invisible threads of control that had shaped her final days. But it was the first crack in the carefully constructed facade of a man who had managed to appear untouchable. The calm fiancé. The composed figure in the eye of a storm he had created. Ian Stewart appeared in control. Untouchable. Yet detectives knew that beneath the surface, behind the measured composure, lay the key to unraveling one of the most chilling crimes in recent memory. And with each passing day, their resolve grew. They would follow the trail of subtle signs, small inconsistencies, and careful manipulations, piecing together the puzzle of Helen Bailey's disappearance, knowing that every clue brought them closer to the truth. The facade was strong, but it would not hold forever. As the days of investigation stretched on, detectives began to uncover a dimension of Helen Bailey's disappearance that had been overlooked in the early chaos: money. Not the sentimental tokens of a life together, but the cold, hard financial stakes that lay beneath the surface. Ian Stewart, it was revealed, stood to inherit an estimated £3 million from Helen's estate. A fortune that could secure a lifetime of comfort. But for investigators, it raised a disturbing question. Could wealth have motivated this disappearance? Could the calm, composed fiancé be hiding a darker agenda? Detectives began meticulously combing through bank records, account statements, and property documents. Every transaction was scrutinized. Patterns emerged. Funds had been moved. Accounts accessed. Investments altered. Every financial maneuver appeared calculated, each step creating an intricate web linking Ian directly to Helen's assets. It wasn't just about inheritance. It was the timing, the subtlety of the moves. Documents showed that discussions about property, insurance, and estate planning had accelerated in the months leading up to her disappearance. And Ian had been at the center of it all, quietly, patiently, ensuring that his hand was on every key asset, every decision, every line of potential profit. Friends and colleagues, initially unaware of these details, began to see the outlines of a disturbing reality. The man they had considered supportive, kind, and even charming now seemed to exist in two worlds, the public one of care and the private one of calculated ambition. Police pieced together the emerging picture with growing horror. It wasn't grief driving Ian Stewart. It wasn't heartbreak or despair. It was greed. A desire to control, to possess, to benefit from a life that was not his own. Each financial document, each trace of manipulation, told a story of deliberate planning. The investigation now moved in two parallel paths. 1. The search for Helen, whose absence loomed like a shadow over every conversation, every visit, every check-in. 2. The pursuit of truth hidden in paper trails, bank statements, and property deeds. To understand the crime, detectives had to follow the money. And every step they took revealed that the disappearance of Helen Bailey was no accident. It was a carefully orchestrated plan, masked in the calm exterior of a man the world believed he could trust. With each new document, each newly uncovered transaction, the scope of Ian Stewart's calculation became clearer. The quiet facade, the measured demeanor, the composed appearances on television and in front of family, all were part of a carefully constructed illusion. And the closer the investigators came to unraveling the financial threads, the closer they came to the chilling truth behind Helen Bailey's disappearance. The investigation into Helen Bailey's disappearance had reached a tense, critical stage. Police intensified their search, methodically moving through every corner of Ian Stewart's property. The house, the garden, the garage, all were examined with a precision that left no space untouched. Officers combed through cupboards, cabinets, and storage areas, their eyes sharp, noting even the smallest anomalies. Days of meticulous work had yielded little. No clues, no signs of struggle. And yet, detectives remained undeterred. They knew instinctively that the breakthrough would come not from what was obvious, but from what had been carefully hidden. Cadaver dogs were brought in. Silent, focused, and trained to detect even the faintest trace of human remains, the dogs moved across the property. At first, nothing. No reaction. But then, near the garage, their behavior changed. They paused, sniffed. Their noses pressed to the ground as if pulling invisible threads from the very air. Handlers leaned in, watching carefully. A dog's pause in training was never a coincidence. Detectives moved closer. Every inch of the garage floor was scrutinized. And then they saw it, an unusual, sealed access point in the floorboards. It was subtle, almost impossible to notice if you weren't looking for it. The hatch blended into the surroundings, ordinary and unremarkable to a casual eye, but to detectives, it radiated suspicion. Carefully, they examined the seal. Every tool was brought to bear, every precaution taken. Slowly, methodically, they began to lift the cover. The tension was suffocating. Each creak of the hatch echoed in the otherwise silent garage. Officers exchanged glances. The air was thick with anticipation. They all sensed that what lay beneath would not only end the search, but expose truths that had been hidden for months. And then, as the final edge of the hatch was lifted, the detectives froze. Beneath it lay the unthinkable. A space that no visitor had ever noticed. A place that had concealed the ultimate betrayal. In that moment, the calm facade of Ian Stewart's life cracked. The ordinary garage, the quiet Royston home, the composed exterior of the man they had been watching, all had hidden the horrifying reality. This was the culmination of weeks of meticulous investigation, the moment that connected the dots between disappearance, motive, and deception. The search for Helen Bailey was over, but the horror of what had been discovered beneath the hatch would reverberate far beyond the walls of that garage. Detectives knew that justice had a new path forward. And while Helen could never be returned, the unmasking of the crime, the proof of betrayal, planning, and greed, was now in their hands. The tension that had been building for weeks, months even, reached its peak as detectives finally opened the concealed hatch beneath the garage. A gust of damp, foul air escaped, filling the space and causing every investigator to recoil slightly. The silence of the garage was shattered by soft, involuntary gasps, a sound that seemed to echo off the walls and linger in the stillness. Inside, the first discovery was Boris, Helen's loyal dog. Shivering, wary, but alive. Relief washed over some officers for a fleeting moment, a brief glimmer of light amidst the darkness of the search. Yet the relief was short-lived. The compartment still held the secret that had haunted every lead, every clue, every painstakingly analyzed document. Moving deeper into the concealed space, investigators uncovered Helen. Buried beneath the very home she had once cherished, hidden beneath layers of soil and concealment. The sight was staggering. The reality hit like a physical blow. The woman who had brought joy and inspiration to countless readers now lay beneath the floorboards of a house she had trusted as safe. Family members were brought to the scene, their arrival a mixture of hope and dread. When they were shown the grim discovery, grief and disbelief washed over them. Their sorrow was raw, unfiltered, echoing through the garage as the detectives worked quietly, documenting and preserving every detail. The emotional weight of the moment was almost unbearable. And then the chilling realization settled over everyone present. This was no impulsive act. It was deliberate. Every detail had been carefully orchestrated by Ian Stewart, from the concealment of the compartment, to the maintenance of a calm, composed public image, to the meticulous planning of Helen's disappearance. The magnitude of the betrayal was overwhelming. Every corner of the home, every familiar object, every floorboard now carried the weight of deception. The roof that had sheltered her, the walls that had witnessed laughter and love, had also concealed one of the darkest betrayals imaginable. The calmness of Ian's demeanor in public, his measured words to family and friends, the strategic management of Helen's finances, all of it pointed to a man who had methodically engineered a horrifying crime. As investigators worked, documenting each piece of evidence and securing the scene, one thought hung heavily in the air. Now the question was no longer where Helen was. The question was how long Ian Stewart had been planning it. How carefully had he constructed this facade of love, stability, and trust? How deeply had he embedded deception in every aspect of their shared life? The full weight of the truth was staggering. Greed, control, and calculated cruelty had converged in this hidden space. The betrayal, once invisible, now lay exposed. And as Helen's family and friends struggled to comprehend the depth of it, the grim reality remained. The woman they loved had been taken from them in the most unthinkable way, beneath the roof of her own home. The calm, composed exterior Ian Stewart had maintained for months was about to face its ultimate test. Detectives, armed with the evidence they had painstakingly gathered, arrived at his home with an arrest warrant. Stewart opened the door. Stone-faced. Emotionless. To the casual observer, he seemed unshakable, a man in full control. But beneath that mask, a storm of tension was brewing. He was informed of the charges, and without a word he was led from his home. Every step toward the waiting police vehicle was measured, deliberate. There were no outbursts, no frantic gestures. Yet the silence was heavier than words could convey.
I'm Detective Sergeant Dave Sharp from the Major Crime Team. Okay, I've got a warrant to search the address. Section 8, what I call Section 8 page warrant. Do you just want to listen to what the officer's got to say?
I've got some words I need to say to you, Mr. Stewart, okay? I'm arresting you on suspicion of the murder of Helen Bailey.
You're joking?
And of disposing her body in a manner to likely to instruct the coroner and the theft of money of Helen Bailey. Okay, so you do not have to say anything that may harm your defence if you do not mention in question something that you may to rely in court. Anything you do say may be given evidence. Do you understand that?
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay, alright, do you want to sit down?
Bloody hell, why? Okay, well, we're going to speak to you at the police station, alright? So what needs to happen, you need to probably get some clothes on, okay, and then you need to go to the police station, and these officers will transport you to the police station, and then you'll have a charge of being interviewed at the police station, okay?
He was a man trained to appear calm, but those trained to read people could sense the subtle signs: a tightening jaw, a flicker in the eyes, the faint stiffness in his shoulders. At the station, the interrogation room was cold, sterile, and unyielding. Stewart was seated, his hands clasped tightly in front of him, eyes fixed on an invisible point in the room. He spoke carefully, repeating phrases that sounded rehearsed, denying involvement in Helen's disappearance with a quiet insistence. "I had nothing to do with it," he repeated again and again. His voice was measured but hollow. Detectives methodically presented the evidence. Traces of Zopiclone, the sedative that had drained Helen in the weeks leading to her death, were revealed. Financial documents outlined Stewart's potential inheritance, a sum that would have provided clear motive. And the fabricated emails, designed to suggest Helen was alive, were exposed as deliberate forgeries. Each piece of evidence was a hammer strike against the facade he had built. With each revelation, Stewart's composure began to falter. His sentences grew shorter, clipped. Repetition gave way to silence. His posture stiffened, subtle gestures betrayed unease. The room seemed to shrink around him, and the air was thick with tension. It was as if the walls themselves were pressing in, demanding truth, exposing deception. Observers, from detectives to forensic experts, noted the transformation. The calm, seemingly ordinary man who had once walked among friends and family with ease was now visibly cracking under scrutiny. Every carefully maintained lie, every act of concealment, was unraveling before their eyes. The arrest was more than procedural. It was a turning point. Stewart, once the picture of normalcy, now faced the consequences of calculated deceit, premeditation, and betrayal. The beginning of justice for Helen Bailey had arrived, and the process of exposing the full extent of Stewart's actions had officially begun. In that sterile room, the weight of truth pressed down, and the once impenetrable mask of the perpetrator was finally showing the first visible fractures.
You're the last person to see her alive. You wait 4 days to report her missing. You're vague about your movements on the 11th, at best, vague. You take a duvet to the tip on the 11th. You don't report her missing for 4 days. The following day you go to Broadstairs. I don't know why. Why did you go there? Did you see Helen on the 16th? Because according to the technical information we've got, her phone is in Broadstairs. And you're in Broadstairs. Was Helen there? She wasn't, was she? Or was she? You tell me. Did you kill Helen Bailey? Did you intend to kill her? Or was this an accident? What happened? Did you just lose control, just lose it? Some big argument and you killed her? And you've been covering up ever since? Because if that's what's happened, you need to tell us now. Because this could be your last opportunity to speak to the police about this. You are here on suspicion of murder. You need to tell us what happened. There is transactions where it clearly shows, from what I've seen, that you have taken money, or someone has taken money, which I believe to be you, from her account into your joint account, which you have obviously access to. Therefore, you've now got access to an extra £12,000. You will have benefited from her death, is that correct? Why do you say that? Financially, you would have benefited.
The morning of the trial began under an atmosphere of hushed anticipation. Every seat in the courtroom was filled. Journalists, family members, friends of Helen, and members of the public who had followed the case from the beginning. The air was thick with a mix of grief, curiosity, and tension, all waiting for the truth to be laid bare. Prosecutors opened their case with precision, painting a meticulous picture of premeditation. They described the months leading to Helen's death, the subtle administration of Zopiclone, the drug that drained her strength, left her drowsy, and rendered her vulnerable. Each detail emphasized the cold, calculated nature of the crime. The courtroom was silent, save for the occasional rustle of papers or low intake of breath as the gravity of the story unfolded. Helen's diaries and personal notes were read aloud, and for a brief, haunting moment, her voice seemed to return to the room. Lines chronicling hope, creativity, and love for her family now carried an unbearable weight. "I thought I could trust him. I never imagined betrayal," one passage read, eliciting a visible shiver from those present. Her words resonated far beyond ink on paper. They became a living testament to the tragedy. Witnesses described Stewart's behavior before and after Helen's disappearance. Friends recounted the subtle changes in their interactions, the occasional odd comment, the calculated calm he displayed while the community worried. Every testimony, every note, every piece of evidence added another layer to the mosaic of deception, leaving no room for doubt. The jury observed Stewart throughout. His calm demeanor in the public eye had vanished in the courtroom. Small twitches, nervous fidgeting, and occasional stares into empty space betrayed the strain of maintaining innocence against overwhelming evidence. The fabricated emails, the manipulated financial records, the drugs, and the concealment beneath the house, each revelation chipped away at his defenses. As closing arguments were made, the weight of betrayal was undeniable. Prosecutors emphasized that Helen's trust had been weaponized against her. Friends described the impact of the crime as a second death, mourning not only her life lost but also the trust and love that had been so cruelly destroyed. The courtroom became a place where grief and justice collided, and the audience could almost feel the pain of the loved ones who could never reclaim what had been taken. When the verdict was read, silence fell over the room. Ian Stewart was found guilty of Helen Bailey's murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. The weight of justice was heavy, yet necessary. In that moment, Helen's story, her life, her dreams, and her tragedy was acknowledged fully. While the betrayal had been staggering, her memory endured, and the courtroom, once a stage for fear and deception, became a place of reckoning. The trial left a lingering question for the public and family alike. How could someone who appeared so ordinary harbor such darkness? And yet, amidst the horror, there was closure, the assurance that justice had been served, and that Helen's story would not be forgotten. The trial was over, but the echoes of betrayal lingered long after the gavel had fallen. Trust had been shattered, a life stolen, and a community left grappling with the enormity of the crime. Helen Bailey's friends and family mourned not only the loss of her life but the innocence that had been so cruelly stripped away. Every memory, every smile, every kind gesture was now tinted with the knowledge of the horror that had occurred behind closed doors. Yet Helen's legacy refused to fade. Her stories, cherished by children and adults alike, continued to inspire and delight, a stark contrast to the darkness that had claimed her life. Through her books, Helen's creativity, warmth, and spirit endured, a reminder that even in tragedy, something beautiful can survive. But the story carried a chilling twist. Ian Stewart, whose crimes had finally been exposed, was later suspected in the death of his first wife, a shadow over the past that suggested Helen might not have been his only victim. The realization cast an even darker light over the man who had hidden her beneath the very home she loved and trusted. And so, Helen's story ends with haunting irony. She wrote tales of happy endings. But her own story concluded in the shadows beneath her home, at the hands of the man she trusted most. If you were on the jury, would you believe life in prison was enough for Ian Stewart? Let us know in the comments below. And as we reflect, consider the fragility of trust, the deception that can lurk behind a smile, and the stories that demand to be told. Next time, the story of a woman who thought she'd found love on Tinder, but instead walked into her killer's trap. And while this chapter closes, the world of true crime continues to reveal stories of deception, double lives, and the tragic cost of misplaced trust. Next time, we'll uncover another chilling story of betrayal and tragedy. Before you go, if you found this story compelling, insightful, or important, please like this video, share it with someone who cares about true crime awareness, and subscribe for more in-depth, narrative-driven documentaries. Your support helps these stories reach more people, honor the victims, and keep their memories alive.